A special Class 218 locomotive rolls out of the locomotive shed. Its paint scheme immediately catches the eye. It was created at the Cottbus plant. The DB vehicle maintenance facility for diesel locomotives is currently located there. The colors and the design had been chosen deliberately. The plant manager provides an outline of the machine's life cycle. Locomotive 218-497 was introduced on May 17, 1979 and later operated under the flag of the Traction Division. This was followed by the local transport business unit, then DB Regio AG. Therefore, the locomotive has all the local service packages you can imagine, and we can use it just as much in mainline service as a local service. The model railroader can use the nifty locomotive rather freely. The hand sample is here on the way to the appropriate train. The locomotive is divided into two parts and reflects the history of the Cottbus plant. One side is kept in black and red and is reminiscent of steam locomotive refurbishment in earlier times. The other side is kept in the current intercity design because the Cottbus plant is currently being rebuilt for the maintenance of the ICE trains, especially the ICE 4 trains. We have added a colorful container train to the half-O model. It also makes a good impression in front of it. Thanks to metal housing and the propulsion on all 4 axles, loads like this one are no problem for the 218. A crossover stop is provided at this train station. Apparently, the sight of the engine is nothing new, because the Preiser lines barely glance at the locomotive. Marklin has modified the model according to the prototype that immediately catches the eye. Many locomotives of the 218 series had a snowplow mounted, which gave the locomotive a striking, beefy appearance. We have now also implemented this rail scraper in the model. I think that we have succeeded in doing this prototypically. The model simply looks beautiful. It's often the little things that make a big difference to the appearance of a locomotive. A locomotive engineer figure has taken a seat in cab 2. The front of the locomotive can be spruced up with other enclosed parts. The lighting is provided by warm white and red LEDs. On the roof, the large fan grille typical of the 218.4 stands out. Please note that the model is still a hand sample. At Marklin, the locomotive will not only appear in the half-O gauge. We have this locomotive in half-O gauge AC, but we also offer it for the smaller gauges, M, Minitrix, or even, who wants it even smaller, for the Z or Z gauge. Please note that even the Minitrix model is still a hand sample. The housings of the heavy Class 150 freight locomotives are given their color scheme in the Göppingen paint shop. Some work steps are carried out before and some after assembling the locomotive. In the first step, we digitally print the locomotive, already with some weathering all around. In the second step, the locomotive is then aged by hand. The roof is darkened at the top. You can reproduce the carbon wear of the pantographs. This was done here with an airbrush gun. And in the last step, the locomotive is weathered again in the assembled state, so that all the add-on parts and the lines also show the weathered condition. So each locomotive differs from the other. Weathering is the latest trend. Yes, you hear more and more that this looks interesting. It's something different, and I have the feeling that it goes down well. The 150-144 is shown here as faded and weathered. There is a locomotive engineer figure in cab 1. The prototype and model correspond to the variant with 5 headlights, platifan grills, rectangular engine room windows and rectangular buffers. The roof on this 150 is even a little dirtier than on the model. In addition to mixed freight trains, long block trains were also in the schedules of the robust 6-axle locomotives. There are 2 matching car sets for the Class 150. These are 2 sets of 3, each with open Falz 176 self-unloading cars. These cars have been weathered and have a coal insert as a load. All of the cars have different car numbers, and set 46-239 includes a car where we have printed and mounted small metal end plates. So you can make a nice train. Which is presented immediately on the half-O layout. Of course, the train can be extended at will. It is a pleasure to look through the engine room windows of the 150. At Trix, the locomotive will also appear in a one-off series. A weathered train simply looks much more realistic, doesn't it? And block trains always have a special appeal. A stately locomotive adorns the yard at the Marklin factory. Now the Giant is also coming as an half-O model. This for good reason, since it was a sensation to bring the engine to its new home.
Das war ja jetzt knapp 3 Jahre her, als wir die Lokomotive dann hierher
It's been almost 3 years now since we got the locomotive onto the Marklin premises. That was a great show. The loading onto a heavy transport truck, then the drive through all of Göppingen, and finally the shunting the locomotive via the rear parking lot. So it was sensational what the drivers of these heavy transport trucks are capable of. It was quite an experience, which we have summarized. The model locomotives comes with a DVD, on which we have compiled these snapshots.
In
the prototype, the Class 44 was of course mainly used in heavy freight service, with heavy coal trains, also ore trains on the way, from Emden also with the Langer Heinrich, so it was already a powerhouse.
Also, das war schon ein Kraftmonster.
An exciting history. In the meantime, it was a commemorative locomotive in Kornwestheim before it came to Göppingen.
Wir haben natürlich versucht, das Modell
And we have tried to reproduce the model exactly like the original, which is here in the yard at Marklin. Small details have also been reproduced, such as on the tender. One bogie here has disc wheels, another has been given spoked wheels. That's how it is on the original, and that's how we've recreated it in the model accordingly. The locomotive itself, of course, has our World of Operations decoder in it again, and we have equipped it with a high-performance propulsion system and a whole host of functions. Even the hand sample is convincing. With Trix, the engine gets an MFX DCC decoder. Piston rod protection tubes, brake hoses and screw coupling imitations are included with the model. Of course, the engine feels most at home on a layout where it can haul a long freight train over a ramp section. Suitable cars can be found in the assortment. A smoke kit can be retrofitted. The lighting, including that of the cab, is done with maintenance-free warm white LEDs. The model reproduces the restored locomotive as it stands at the Marklineum in operating condition around 1963. Experience the prototype up close at the Marklineum in Göppingen. It is worth it. And the new model of the 441315? Simply great. Big Boy, Challenger and the Northern 844. These are the most famous steam locomotives in the USA. The first two have already been realized by Marklin and Trix. As a new fall product, another giant is now appearing with the 844 from Union Pacific, which is an amazing 30 meters in length in the prototype. A perfectly executed model.
The
locomotive is very American, an impressive, powerful steam locomotive, and we have also succeeded in creating this example in the model. The model also has a considerable length and is largely made of metal. We've paid attention to all the details, and we've included a dynamic steam output, which I really like. There are many light functions, from the marker lights on top to the number boards and the normal lights front-rear to the marker lights at the rear of the tender. We have also built an extensive sound package into the locomotive. Furthermore, the distinctive rail scraper stands out. This detail was also very nicely recreated. The same applies to the large boxpark wheels, whose rims are offset in color. The sheer size of this steam locomotive can be guessed from the prototype photos. Every special trip with the 844 turns into a spectacle of a special kind. Another tip: together with the Big Boy and the 43-617 car set, the legendary special trip of the two giants on the occasion of the 150 years of Golden Spike anniversary in May 2019 can also be reenacted. The 844 also comes from Trix, of course. Within just a few years, the Vectron family has become the locomotive on Europe's rails. The Austrian railway ÖBB have also agreed to supply up to 200 examples and also traction freight trains through Germany with these machines. Thus, a newly constructed HVO model must not be missing at Marklin and Trix.
An
ÖBB Vectron, a multi-system locomotive with road number 1293011, with a somewhat different country package than the models we presented in the summer. Of course, this shows in one place or another, for example on the turntables, the sandfiller necks or pantographs. You can see differences there. The model is made entirely of metal. Even the carrier is made of metal, of die-cast zinc. We have installed a 5-pole motor. All 4 axles are motorized. Furthermore, we have installed numerous light functions that are tailored to the different countries. This means that there is a wealth of light functions that provide greater play value and create even closer to the prototype. The locomotives are also at home in Italy, for example on the cross-country route from Verona to Kassel. Particularly heavy trains require up to 3 of these engines, as we see here on the Brenner North ramp. Also from Verona, this train is heading for Nuremberg. MTE cars are being towed at the Säben Monastery near Klausen. Picture perfect autumn on the Main. You can help yourself from the assortment as you like from Era 6 and put together beautiful freight trains. After all, this corresponds to the prototype. The locomotive runs not only in Austria, like the Austrian Vectron, but in many countries in Europe. Therefore, you assemble your freight train as you like.
Seinen Güterzug zusammenstellen, wie man will.
The Austrian Vectron is a perfect addition to the HVO assortment at Marklin and Trix for all Era 6 fans. Freilassing is not far from the Austrian border. In the Lokwelt there, remarkable exhibits remind us of the good old days of the railroad. Here we met up with Gudrun Geiblinger, who is currently presenting a small exhibition of her art locomotives there. She has a Marklin model in the works for the first time.
Es gibt ja Themen, wo man
Motiv als Vorlage hat.
There are subjects where you don't have a motive as a template. Albert Einstein. How do you draw a theory of relativity? You can't. Difficult. I didn't have any pictures. With Leonardo da Vinci, I had lots of pictures. And I would actually need 20 more cars in the back, because I had far too many images. He is, of course, one of my absolute idols, a genius. Railways and design are the buzzwords, and there will soon be an exhibition on this at the Nuremberg Transport Museum, in the Deutsche Bahn Museum. Exactly. And a corresponding locomotive is also to be designed. Now you've been given this assignment and the topic of railways and design. How do you approach the topic?
Ja, das ist ein bisschen zu weit vorgegriffen. Den Auftrag kriege ich nicht vorher.
We're getting ahead of ourselves here. I don't get the contract beforehand. I always say, well, let's see if I can get something together. I don't want an assignment in advance, otherwise I'm under so much pressure, because I always have to see first if I can come up with something on this topic. I always have to brainstorm for myself for a few days. I sit down, let everything sink in a bit. Sometimes I come up with a lot right away. It depends on the topic.
Es kommt immer aufs Thema drauf an, ne? Man muss schon sehen, da ist eine Handschrift dahinter.
You have to see it. There is a signature behind it. It's not divided into 1,000 images, but rather a streamlined signature, a brushstroke in this case. And it's precisely the colors that the DB Museum is promoting for this exhibition, for example red, blue and this green. And yes, it's young, dynamic. I definitely didn't want to draw a locomotive on a locomotive again, for example. I didn't want to print an ICE on it. I also don't print another house on top of a house. That would be inherently contradictory.
Auf ein Haus kein anderes Haus drauf, das wäre ja widersprüchlich in sich. Ich habe schon sehr viele Lokomotiven zerlegt.
I have already disassembled a great many locomotives, and all the ones I knew from various manufacturers were made of plastic. I got something that was really new to me. I thought I already know everything after the 45th locomotive, and of course the hand samples are always there for me, so I know what the larger real thing looks like. And you notice right away, it is weighty. I like that. Totally fascinating.
Mich fasziniert.
Metal is nothing new for Gudrun Geiplinger, as she has also created small locomotive pendants in silver. I assume that you enjoyed working for Marklin, and I for one would be happy if there were other things that you did together with Marklin.
Ja, natürlich und vor allen Dingen.
Yes, of course, and above all, I'm always interested in a new challenge. The subject areas are so different, and so are the demands I have to meet in terms of the idea. I've already worked with, or rather been allowed to work with, many different brands.
Betreuen dürfen oder beglücken dürfen, wenn man so sagen kann, weil sie die Hamburger Hafenbahn.
The Hamburg Port Railway or Danube ships like the Mariandel, completely different assignments. And of course, I would be delighted to be able to continue crafting new ideas for a global brand like Marklin.
Weiterhin neue Ideen spinnen zu dürfen.
In keeping with the exhibition at the DB Museum in Nuremberg, which begins on October 1st, the 101, designed by Gudrun Geiplinger in the prototype, will refer to the interesting history of design in railroading. Both locomotive sides will look different. In addition to the corresponding half-O model, a Z or Z locomotive and a model in nominal N gauge will also be published by Minitrix. For the first time, the half-O model gets a mid-mounted engine with propulsion on all 4 axles. We will now present further new items in the half-O gauge. Marklin is releasing a set with 3 grain cars. Different road numbers and fine printing distinguish the cars. We come now to the Classic series. When we started the Classic series in 2018, we naturally included the V60 as a classic model directly in this series. However, this model still has the old telex coupler installed. Therefore, we decided to equip the V60 after almost 4 years in the range with the new telex coupler and at the same time change the era. The old locomotive was an Era 3 locomotive, and with the new one we are now serving Era 4, a shunting locomotive with a classic old red paint scheme that should be on every layout. You can always use freight cars for Era 6, including the SBB 4-axle sliding wall car, a reissue with a new road number. It can be seen in the prototype all over Europe. The 4-axle container transport car SGNS comes in another variation. For the first time, a high cube box container will be on the car as freight. The following applies to all freight cars. For DC railroaders, the dealer will gladly exchange the wheel sets. To go with the Austrian Vectron, there is a 6-car hinged roof car set of the type TDRRS from the Austrian Federal Railways. An ideal car for block trains. The ICE fleet comes as a surprise with colorful stripes, now available even in rainbow colors. The model is the ICE3 as we know it and as we already had it in our assortment with red stripes. There will be a 5-piece basic set and the 3-piece car add-on set. The ICE3 will have a new propulsion concept with 4 axles. The standard LED interior lighting will now be digitally switchable, and the same applies to the restaurant and cab lighting. The brake discs on the axles of the cab control cars and 2 cars in the add-on set will be reproduced in detail. I will say that the intention of the rainbow colors is not to proselytize, but it is important that no one is excluded because of their orientation, religion or origin. A clear message. The ICE3 Munich is in operation all over Germany and will soon be available for Marklin and Trix fans as well. From the ICE to the Railbus, presenting the Class 724, a rail service vehicle that has a total of 6 figures in it. The model will be released by Trix. The Caltex tank car, run by the Dutch Railways, is shown here in the operating condition from the 1950s. The lettering was a design study that unfortunately never went into production. Very dainty with its access ladder and catwalk. The Christmas car is an annual favorite. Really beautiful even in 2021. The Half-O model corresponds to a branch line car with its Bavarian design. There are exchange wheel sets for Trix and Trix Express. For Z or Z fans, a Donnerbüchse is offered in a Christmas design. Viewers are particularly fascinated by 1-gauge models. Their appearance is simply magnificent. This is especially true for steam locomotives.
Für mich persönlich die schönste, die eleganteste, auch von der Farbgebung her, das Dunkelgrün.
For me personally, it is the most beautiful, the most elegant, also from the color scheme dark green, with these wonderful boiler fittings in a golden color, in brass, as we have reproduced them. The model itself, like the other 2, is made of metal, quite heavy, high traction. Technically, it has a decoder in it with 32 functions. It has a smoke generator and a multi-stage cylinder steam in symmetry with the driving state. We have everything that is technically state-of-the-art inside, including the ability to switch the control to readjust to the continuous drive setting. The sand covers can be opened. There are graters with it. The smoke chamber door can be opened. The sash locks are movable. The locomotive also has a current buffer. Technically, it is largely identical to the 241 A65. A cult item, no question. But modern locomotives are also entering the program for the first time. 147, 187 is one of the themes. We make these with and without flex panel. We do them in the IC color scheme and in the beautiful BLS cargo color scheme, the Alpinists, and in the Swiss rail traffic color scheme. Thus we have this yellow-white-gray, which I also think is an elegant color design.
Die Maschine ist für uns eine komplette Neukonstruktion. aus Metall, Zinkdruckguss.
The machine is a completely new design for us, made of metal, zinc die-cast, and of course has everything in it that a model must have. The pantographs will be driven, either all 4 or just 2 of them. We have current buffer in it, and there are light functions that we haven't had before, high beams for example. I think this is a model on the cutting edge and, I'll say, new territory for us, because we now want to offer an Era 6 engine.
Weil wir jetzt Epoche 6 Maschine anbieten wollen. Wir werden auch einen entsprechenden modernen Wagen dazu anbieten.
We will also offer a corresponding modern car to go with it. It is a test for us whether the current era is already ready to be worked on.
Bearbeitet zu werden, es mal so zu sagen.
Yes, even a modern locomotive has its charms, both as a prototype and a model. For the presentation of the magnificent models, new display cases have been added to the range in 2 sizes. The highlight here is that the engine's functions on display can be activated via the web using a smartphone or tablet. The highlight for the fall product line in N is the 038357.
Jetzt sind die ersten 2 Kuppelachsen.
Here the first 2 coupled axles are driven by gears, and because it is a tub-tender locomotive, we have also made this bevel on the coal box for the first time. As a further highlight, this first 38 locomotive with a tub-style tender also has sound on board for the first time. It is a Rottweiler steam locomotive, and therefore we have taken the express train 4505 from 1969, as it ran between Tübingen and Sigmaringen. It contains 3 passenger cars. Of these, 2 second-class cars have a streamlined design, as I call it now, as this year's new design. The ABE car is a normal express train car. It was not available in a streamlined design in the Directorate at that time. These 3 passenger cars have factory-installed interior lighting. They are supplemented by a baggage car without interior lighting of the PW4U36 type. The whole ensemble, both the locomotive and the cars, are available for the MHI.
Als auch die Wagen erscheinen für die MAI. Jetzt kommen wir zur Epoche 3.
We now come to Era 3, where we have 3 4-axle tank cars in the USATC, for example, the US Army in the 1950s-60s. The US Army had its own tank cars, which, as far as we know, have not yet been reproduced in N-gauge. We have now set our sights on them. A nice car set that can be run with all freight locomotives from that time.
Lokomotiven aus der Zeit gefahren werden. Wir empfehlen natürlich unser Clubmodell, die Baureihe 44 mit Wandentender.
Of course, we recommend our club model, the Class 44 with tub-style tender. Furthermore, for more modern times, we have a container transport car from ERR, loaded with 3 wood chip inner-freight containers.
Haben wir noch?
But that's not all, because the Type GLMHS Leipzig boxcar honors Faller's 75th anniversary. It's a perennial favorite, the Kittel steam railcar. With it, we now come to the new products for the nominal Z or Z gauge.
Der erste war ja Epoche 3 in Rot. Sehr erfolgreich, muss ich sagen.
The first one was in Era 3, in red. Very successful, I must say, with a lot of customer approval that it has become a nice model. It is almost at the small series level, but much cheaper. It has sold very well. And now we're bringing the Era 2 version in this wonderful cream ivory, or whatever you want to call the color, and red. The equipment is basically the same. We have LED lighting in it and a bell armature motor. For me, the Era 2 color scheme is the nicer one. I have to say that outright. It looks nicer than the solid red one.
Muss man ganz klar sagen, sieht für mich netter aus wie der einfarbig rote. Und das zweite, was ich erwähnen möchte, das ist die...
And the second one I want to mention is the Class 280. We had the V80 as an insider model after all. And now comes the Era 4 version. Also with bell armature motor, LED lighting and light change red-white. I think it too is an attractive model for Z or Z gauge fans.
Die Freunde der Sportzeit.
And more new items are rolling into the Z or Z range, such as the Austrian Vectron Class 1293, a finely detailed design. A bell armature motor is at work on board. We also continue with modern rolling stock. We present the IC2. In addition to the Class 146.5 train locomotive, a set with 4 double-decker cars is a new addition to the assortment. The locomotive has propulsion on all 4 axles. There is also something else to celebrate soon. We are celebrating 50 years of Mini Club, and that means also 50 years of the Z or Z gauge. I don't want to jump the gun just yet, but we have prepared several new designs in any event and will celebrate it accordingly. This cute steam locomotive with its many details will delight garden railroaders. Its prototype is still in operation to this day.
In Amerika gibt's in Neuengland.
In America, in New England, there is a railroad called the Wiscasset, Waterville and Farmington Railway. This is a museum railroad. It has a small steam locomotive that still runs today, and passenger cars to go with it. These cars are the typical US vintage cars. When we talk about New England, everyone immediately thinks of Indian summer. It's really beautiful to see the trees there in their yellow-red hues while riding a steam train through the area. That's what distinguishes this railroad, located north of Portland in Maine. If you've ever been there, you can relate. Or you can easily bring this vibe home with the new LGB models. This locomotive is also in operation in a beautiful landscape.
Die Zillertalbahn.
The Zillertal Railway in Tyrol celebrates its 120th anniversary next year, and for this occasion we have once again heard the many times requests for Austrian models and realized something. One Zillertal Railway train is presented, consisting of a Class U locomotive, 2 passenger cars and the, I am tempted to say, world-famous Fasselwagen. Of course, it's not just the old models as they were back then. We have completely renovated the U. We have contemporary equipment with wheel-synchronized smoke and a sound decoder. The lamps are also new. The boiler equipment was adapted to the original. And last but not least, brass-edged plates were added, so that the model representation is really a nice train, as it still runs there today. A very rustic car also runs from time to time in the Zillertal.
Ja, der Fasselwagen.
Yes, the Fasselwagen got its name because there is a barrel on the chassis, in addition to a small cabin. There is a bar in the cabin and seats in the barrel, so you can enjoy various drinks. The car is made for taking special trips, because you can celebrate nicely in it.
Schön feiern da drin.
Let's stay in the Alps and come to the Rhaetian Railway. From Chur, for example, we can go up to Arosa. You can visit the Bear Land there. Reason enough to design some Rhaetian railway cars and now also an Allegra to match. A corresponding LGB model was presented for the first time in Chur. For the past 3 years we have had a cooperation between the Rhaetian Railway and the Arosa Bearland. This was an opportunity for us to display the model as with the original that we see here. Yes, it's a hell of a climb, very tight radii. You're not that fast, but the performance of the traction units is really outstanding. When you first wait at the station plaza in Chur for a train up to Arosa, you still have no idea what kind of mountain railroad awaits you with its narrow track.
107 Jahre ist die Bahn unterwegs zwischen Chur und Arosa.
This train has been traveling between Chur and Arosa for 107 years. And it's funny when you stand up here. In Chur it only runs as a streetcar, a real streetcar. We pass the Maltese Tower, we pass the city gate, where it goes to the old town. Look out! And then the streetcar becomes a mountain railroad, which runs through a breathtakingly wild landscape with a maximum gradient of 60 per thousand. This train also includes Bearland cars, which especially delight the children. Arosa is located at an altitude of 1,739 meters. Chur is 584 meters above sea level. The cable car now takes us up to Bearland at an altitude of over 2,000 meters. It has something emotional about it. The bear attracts people. Every child has his cuddly bear, so we all have some relationship to the animal at some point. And yes, it's going well. We have around 70,000 visitors every year, which shows there's a lot of interest in the subject. The best way to get there is with the Russian railway.
Man sagte, dass die Straße
It is said that the road to Arosa has 365 curves for the passenger cars. So, for every day of the year, there is a curve. The approach is really arduous, in winter even partly precarious. In this respect, the Russian railway is a good choice, cruising through the countryside, over wonderful viaducts, through tunnels and so on. It is very delightful. The mountain landscape is the bear's natural habitat. A wonderful experience for the whole family, including an exciting ride on the Russian railway. In addition to the Bearland Allegra, which is already sold out at the factory, these two passenger cars are also entering the program as a new fall product in an unmodified reissue. In addition, a colorful printed sliding wall car will be released, which has the Bündner Güterbahn as its theme. This is also an unmodified reissue. Those were the new fall products from Marklin, Trix and LGB. You can find more info here.